What if the perfect 1960s housewife next door was passing nuclear secrets to Moscow? This is not a movie. This is Betty Smith, codename Bluebird, and her story was buried for decades until the CIA finally opened the files in 2025. Let's set the scene. It's 1958 in a quiet suburb outside Washington, D.C. The streets are lined with identical two-story homes, each with a neatly trimmed lawn and a shiny Chevrolet in the driveway. Kids ride bicycles after school, radios play Elvis, and every porch has a rocking chair for evening conversations. This is the golden age of American suburbia, or so everyone thinks. Betty Smith is 34 years old. She's the picture-perfect homemaker. Blonde hair in a neat bun, apron always spotless, smile ready for any neighbor who stops by. She has 2 children, Tommy, age 8, and little Susie, age 5, and a husband named Richard, who works as an engineer at a nearby defense plant. Betty is the queen of the local PTA. She organizes bake sales, volunteers at the school library, and her apple pie wins first prize at the county fair every single year. Neighbors call her the sweetest woman on Maple Street. But every Tuesday morning, after the kids leave for school and Richard heads to work, Betty does something no one suspects. She locks the kitchen door, pulls down the shades, and sets up a tiny camera on the counter. The documents Richard casually leaves on his desk at home, blueprints, schematics, classified memos, are photographed one by one. Betty develops the film in her darkroom hidden behind the pantry. She reduces the images to microdots, smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. Then she rolls out pie dough, presses the dots into the crust, and bakes the evidence right into dessert. By noon, the pie is cooling on the windowsill, looking innocent. Betty changes into her best dress, grabs her grocery list, and heads to the local supermarket. That's where she meets Ivan. He's a tall man in a gray suit, always pretending to examine frozen peas. Ivan works at the Soviet embassy, but to the cashier he's just another customer. Betty hands him her list. He hands her his. Inside the folded paper is a new assignment. A quick nod, a polite smile, and the exchange is complete. The secrets are on their way to Moscow. Betty ass payments arrive the same way. Cash hidden inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread at the bakery counter. She tucks the money into a false bottom in her sewing kit. Life goes on. Richard never notices the missing documents. The kids devour the pie and ask for seconds. Betty keeps smiling. Now fast forward to October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis dominates every newspaper and television screen. President John F. Kennedy appears on national TV, demanding the Soviets remove their nuclear missiles from Cuba. U.S. Navy ships blockade the island. The world teeters on the edge of annihilation. In the Smith household, tension is sky high. Richard comes home late, exhausted from emergency meetings at the plant. He brings new blueprints, top-secret designs for a radar system that can track Soviet submarines anywhere in the Atlantic. Betty photographs them immediately. This package is different. If Moscow gets these plans, they can hide their subs from American detection. One undetected launch could start World War III. Betty's hands tremble as she develops the film. She hasn't slept in days. The pies come out burnt. Richard asks what's wrong. She blames the oven. Little Susie finds her crying in the laundry room and asks why Mommy is sad. Betty almost confesses everything, almost quits. But Ivan's latest note is clear. The cause needs you now more than ever. Peace through superior knowledge. Then comes the revelation that changes everything. In 2025, the CIA finally declassifies Betty's file. The truth is staggering. Betty wasn't coerced or blackmailed. She volunteered, willingly, passionately. The story begins in 1945, right after VE Day. Betty was a 21-year-old Red Cross nurse stationed in a field hospital near Berlin. One stormy night, medics brought in a Soviet lieutenant named Alexei Ivanov. Shrapnel had torn through his chest. He was barely conscious, bleeding heavily. The American doctors were overwhelmed. Betty stayed by his side for hours. She held his hand, cleaned his wounds, read him letters from his mother in Leningrad. Alexei called her my American angel. In broken English, he promised to write once the war ended. They kept that promise. Letters crossed the Atlantic for years. hidden in care packages, coded in birthday cards, routed through neutral countries. Betty married Richard in 1948, moved to the suburbs, had children. Alexei rose through the ranks of Soviet intelligence. In 1956, he made his first request, just one photograph of a harmless document. Betty hesitated, then agreed. One favor became two, then dozens. By 1958, she had a code name, Bluebird, and a regular handler. She was one of the KGB's most valuable assets in North America. October 27, 1962. The crisis reaches its peak. A Soviet submarine, B-59, is surrounded by U.S. destroyers dropping depth charges. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, believes war has already begun. He orders the launch of a nuclear torpedo. Only one man stands in the way, political officer Vasily Arkhipov, who refuses to give consent without direct orders from Moscow. Betty's radar blueprints have already reached the Kremlin. If the torpedo fires, her information becomes the match that lights the fuse. That night, Betty makes her final decision. She takes the last roll of film, the submarine tracking radar, and feeds it into the kitchen stove. The negatives curl and blacken. She tells Ivan the camera malfunctioned. He threatens to expose her, to harm her children. Betty stands firm. "Do what you must," she says. "I'm done." The submarine never fires. Archipov's veto saves the world. The crisis ends days later. Betty breathes a secret sigh of relief. The FBI closes in during the summer of 1964. A nosy neighbor notices smoke from the Smith backyard and sees Betty burning papers. Agents raid the house while the children are at summer camp. They find the shortwave radio in the attic, code books in the flour tin, thousands in cash inside a hollowed-out family Bible. Betty is arrested quietly. No headlines, no public trial. She disappears into witness protection under a new identity. Her children are told their mother died in a tragic car accident. Richard remarries within a year. The files remain sealed for 61 years. Only in 2025, under a new declassification order, does the full dossier emerge. Betty lived to 92 in a small town in Oregon. She kept baking apple pies until her hands could no longer roll dough. She never told a soul. Not her new neighbors. Not her grandchildren. Her final words to the hospice nurse who cared for her in her last days: "Tell them I'm sorry for the lies, and tell them the pie was worth every risk." Was Betty Smith a traitor who nearly started World War III? Or the unsung hero whose change of heart prevented it? The answer depends on where you draw the line between love and loyalty. Drop your verdict in the comments below. Smash that like button if this story gave you chills, and hit subscribe with the bell turned on. Your next declassified Cold War secret drops in exactly 5 days. The past is still watching, and it has more stories to tell.